Hello everyone, good to see you all back. This is International Master Asaf Givon here. I wanted to discuss with you a very interesting topic today, and one which is very tricky and perhaps sometimes neglected from a kind of mainstream kind of videos of chess is endgames, and in particular I wanted to discuss some tricky opposite colored bishop endgames. And the reason I want to discuss this is because this is perhaps one of the most tricky endgames to face. In the opposite color bishop endgame, sometimes one or two pawn's advantage might not be enough to win if the defending side is able to reach some sort of a stronghold and block his opponent's pawns from easily advancing. And because of this, many times, in order to win such positions or to defend such positions, so we need to make very special measures in order to kind of make our advantage count. So I wanted just to start this video lesson with this position in front of you. From a game between two very strong Chinese players, Wang Yue and Ding Liren, and we see that white is 2 pawns up. It's an opposite color bishop endgame, basically meaning that white has a light square bishop, black has a dark square bishop. And white has 2 pawns up, but if you try to win in this position just by, let's say, regular means, you will find out that this position is a fortress. For example, if the white king just, for example, starts to go towards the king side to support the pawns, black will simply play king g5. And in this position, because there is no pressure against the b6 pawn, then the bishop is free to go. So for example, black is just standing in place, kind of saying for white, okay, you have 2 pawns up, but show me what you got. Show me exactly how are you going to win. So and believe me, you might try to beat this position as much as you can, as long as those pawns on the king side don't have the possibility to advance. There will be no significant chances to win this position. So let's go back to the initial position, and now I want to discuss with you a principle that will help you a lot in this kind of endgames. So I've never seen any references for this kind of principle, so I'll give it a name of myself. I'll call it the three passers rule. So or the 3 passers principle. So this basically means that in a majority of cases, or in many cases, the defending side is likely to be able to hold on in an opposite colored bishop endgame if the attacking side has 2 passed pawns. That's the case here, 2 passed pawns, but we see that the defending side is safely blockading those pawns. Usually this will be sufficient for a draw, but the defending side will be too much for him to defend if it would be 3 passed pawns, of course, or more. So white's task here is basically to somehow create another passed pawn and basically create a scenario where the black pieces cannot hold everything together. And this is very tricky to achieve, but Wang Yue here came with a nice concept here. It is white to move, and I invite you to try to think about it and see if you can get the strongest move that the Chinese player find here. So the move here is pretty nice. It's pawn to b4, basically forcing black to make a decision whether he takes with the bishop or with the pawn. If he takes with the bishop, it's actually pretty easy. Then we just achieve exactly what we wanted. Now the king can take on b6, and this a pawn is free to advance all the way to a8 without any interruptions. So black was forced to take with the pawn on b4, and here another extremely important move. bishop to b3, because without this move, black could, at the next move, push his own pawn to b3. And now we see a very picturesque position where white gave up one pawn, but he forced black into kind of self-cage his own bishop on a5. So you see that this bishop has no squares to advance to. So at this position, this bishop on a5 is actually, we can count it as just another pawn. It's not even a bishop at the moment. And now black is in troubles, because let's see what happens. Basically, he's playing with a piece down. So now, after king g5, now after caging black's bishop, white can go back to his plan to push the pawns on the queen side, on the king side, I'm sorry. And now let's see the difference. King e6, king g5. And now the difference is that black has no moves with his bishop, which means that he cannot pass the move to white. He's forced to be in a zugzwang position, a position where he must make a destructive move. So for example, king e5. Notice that the black king cannot take on g4, because then the h pawn will be unstoppable. So because the bishop has no moves, the black king will have to go, for example, on h6. But now, after, for example, king f6, now the king is just in time to support the advance of these two pawns, and white will win very easily. Also, notice that black might as well, at one point, to play the move b5 in order to liberate his bishop. But then white achieves what he wants, the three passers principle. Now he has another passed pawn. And as we know, he cannot stop three passed pawns. And now it's kind of a nice dance, because now actually the white king is going back on the queen side after forcing black to play the move b5. And now actually the b pawn is actually the pawn who is going to decide the game. So actually, in the actual game, black already resigned after the move queen d5. He understood what is going on. And this is actually, I would say, one of the most beautiful examples of winning in opposite color bishop in a very, let's say, special way. We see that a little king dance here. He is going to the king side, then back to the queen side, a little back and forth, and trying to kind of provoke or force black to make destructive moves, kind of make moves which were useful for him. For example, create another pawn, a passed pawn for him. So here you see the first example. The second example is taken straight from a very high-profile game, also very old game, from Paul Keres with the white pieces versus Mikhail Tal with the black pieces. Two very strong players at their times. And we see a bit of a similar scenario, an endgame where black is having a pawn up. Let me even flip the board for you, so it will be easier. Black has a pawn up in this endgame, the b pawn, but as we know, just one pawn is not going to it's probably not going to be enough in order to win the game. So for example, if black just starts pushing his b pawn, white will play bishop d2, put a very kind of useful blockade on b4, and as you can see, it's extremely difficult to make any progress here with black, because there is nothing to support the advance of the b pawn, and there are practically no more passed pawns for black. So Mikhail Tal figured this problem, and now let's try to play according to the principle of the three passers. Can black make a scenario here when will have three passed pawns, which the white pieces wouldn't be able to control? So here this is in a bit of extreme scenario, because the black king is extremely active, and this actually allows black to make the following sequence of moves. So bishop takes f3, sacrificing the bishop, pawn takes f3, king takes f3, and Mikhail Tal actually evaluated very well that now that he has 1, 2, 3 passed pawns, together with this very active king on f3, even though white is having the bishop, which is usually a very good piece in order to... It's a good piece that can control a lot of passed pawns, but it cannot control 3 passed pawns. So let's see what happened next. Also, by the way, one more very crucial fact that helps black a lot is the fact that those passed pawns are very much far away from each other. So that's another principle you can get from this video. When you create passed pawns in such endgames, or actually in many other endgames, you want them to be as far away as possible from each other, because this makes the opponent's pieces more difficult to stop them or cope with them, like we see in this example. So white played here the move king f1, so he's rushing his king perhaps to the other side to deal with this pawn. So now black starts pushing his pawns practically simultaneously throughout the board. So the b pawn goes first, white is forced to go bishop d2 in order to stop it. But now, once again, the principle of 3 passers, pawn to h4. Now the h pawn starts advancing. So the pawn cannot be stopped from playing h3. White played bishop b4 here. Black played h3. And white was forced to play here the move king g1 in order to stop the h pawn. And this position would probably be a draw if black wouldn't have, for example, his f pawn. And this is now the most important factor in this position. Black has another passed pawn, which is now coming alive, becoming useful. So black's last move, which actually sealed the fate of white's here, the move king e2. The move king e2 is nice because it liberates the way for the pawn to be advanced while also controlling all of its advancing squares. It's extremely difficult for white to deal. It's just impossible for white to deal with those passed 3 pawns. So once again, an example of the power of 3 passed pawns, which, as I mentioned in this example, as they want to be as far away as possible from each other in order to create the most difficulties to the opponent. Now let us see the last example, which is perhaps out of all of these positions that we've seen previously, this is perhaps the most well-known one. This is straight from the game Topalov versus Shirov. One of the definitely one of my favorite kind of games, and this is also a game where it's considered to be one of the most beautiful games in chess history. Basically, it is black to move here, and it's kind of similar to the previous position. White here, black even has 2 pawns up. But once again, here there is one factor which comes into fray, which is the factor of timing. White needs to, white in this position needs to be in time to position his king in the center on e3, or even better, somewhere on d4, in order to blockade the d4, the d5 pawn. And we see that this bishop on c3 is actually doing a good job of both stopping the d pawn, but also controlling the movements of the a pawn. So to win in this position, winning in this position is probably not possible by just regular means. So just for example, if black just plays bishop e4 with the idea to activate his king, then white will be in time to play king f2, king f5, let's say pawn to g3, next move king e3, and the king will reach the d4 square and probably make a draw without too much difficulties. So Shirov in this position probably understood what is going on. He understood that this is a very critical position, that he must do something very quickly before the white king manages to reach the center of the board. And he found a brilliant idea here, which is also related to our principle of three passers. He found a way to basically gain two things. First of all, gain a tempo to bring his king into the center, but also to create another passed pawn. So you can once again stop the video and try to think about it. So the move is bishop h3. Basically a suicidal move. The bishop simply puts itself on a position where it can be taken. So pawn takes h3. So why is Shirov made such a move? First of all, as mentioned, we see that now black has another passed pawn. But this is not yet the most important factor in the position. The most important factor of the position is the king activity. How fast can black activate his king in order to support his passed pawns? Because the pawns cannot advance by themselves. They are being blockaded by the white bishop. They have to have the support of the black king. And now, thanks to this bishop h3 move, black gained a tempo. He now played king f5. White played king f2. And now, if white would have just one more move to play the move king e3, it would probably be okay. But now black is in time to play king e4, even sacrificing this pawn on f6, just in order to activate his king. If white is declining to take on f6, for example, plays king e2, hoping to stop the black king for any more advancements, then the third pawn is coming into the fray. Black can start pushing also his f pawn, and once again these three pawns advancing simultaneously will be impossible for white to maintain, as we have seen in the previous example, because these pawns are very much far away from each other. So Topalov took on f6. Black played here the nice move pawn to d4. This move basically cutting off the bishop from this diagonal. Now a3 is a very big threat, after which white will not be able to reach. White will not be able to stop the white pawn, so he played bishop to e7, which is a force move. Now, remember the principle of king in front of pawns in the endgame, something I also discussed in my course on endgame technique and practical endgames. King d3. The king wants to reach the c2 square, where it can both support the d pawn, but in some scenarios also support his a pawn. Now after the move bishop c5, trying to stop the black pawn, black played king c4. Bishop went back to e7. And now after king b3, which is a very nice and precise move, which once again both supports the advance of the a pawn, but also controls this c2 square. So for example, if white tries to go king e2, now black can play king c2, and this d pawn is advancing without too much troubles. Even if the white bishop is coming to try and stop him after d3, king e1, now once again we take advantage of our two pawns. We can play, for example, a3. And now if white takes, then d2 check followed by d1, and black wins. So actually in the game after king b3, Topalov already resigned at this point. So basically what we see in this example and in the previous ones, that sometimes one, even two passed pawns in the opposite color bishop endgames is not by itself enough to win. Sometimes we need to make some special moves or special measures in order to either activate our king or create another passed pawn. Remember the principle of three passers. Or as we've seen in these examples, it's a kind of combination of both of these. So if you would like to learn some more about endgames and endgame technique, I'm inviting you to find my course about practical endgames I did for the Remote Chess Academy, which you will find in the link in the description. So thank you very much guys for watching this. Hope you learned something and enjoyed it. See you guys in the next videos. Bye bye.